Marley Knockers, the podcast. On today's episode, we will be meeting the rest of our team and talking a little bit about their background.
First up, we have Noelle.
My name is Noelle. I've been in the group since 2008. Kim is my mom, and then Bethany is my sister. And so I was kind of already involved with it even before the name came about, because we were already, doing like EVPs and stuff just around the house or literally wherever we went. We just kind of started doing a bunch of stuff. So my first paranormal experience was, I think, the beginning of middle school, maybe late elementary school. I was in YMCA and we were at Cardome. So Cardome is like an old nunnery in Scott County. We were down in the basement, and most of Cardome is used as administrative work. There's not much that really goes on other than like event space. So there's not a lot of church service or anything like that happens in that building anymore. So we were in the basement and we were all taking a nap. And I remember our counselors were like teenagers. So it was storming really bad and everyone was kind of like already pretty antsy about the storm. And so we were all taking a nap and I woke up because I heard like doors kept slamming, and I was watching our counselors kind of like walking in circles pacing, and they were like obviously very freaked out, and I was like, oh God, what is happening? Well, I started listening as they were opening the door, and we kept hearing like choir music. It was super faint, and we were told that no one else was in the building at the time, so they kept opening and closing the door to see if the sound was getting louder, but when they went into the hallway, like you didn't hear it at all. It was just in this room and there's nobody upstairs. So that's probably the first time I think I ever like had a concrete memory of, okay, like I don't know what's happening.
Cardome is a super creepy place. I remember when I was a kid, I was probably in middle school or high school, we had a church lock-in there and we had some of the same type of stuff happen. We could hear people running around on the floor above us, and we were all locked in on the first floor. It was a crazy time. Sadly, you can't really get into it anymore because the Catholic Church bought it a couple years ago.
It's a shame that you can't go back to Cardome to compare your perspective of the location as adults compared to when you were both middle schoolers or elementary schoolers.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's a lot of history there, for one, and just the grounds in and of itself is very eerie. Like, they had that like big black barn behind Cardome that we would stay in a lot during the summers too when we were outside. And it's just weird. Like, the whole area is just super scary, honestly.
I agree. We had our senior field day in that barn, and it was.
We did too.
It was that's a big thing in Scott County. That's where you go.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything that happened recently?
Yeah, on the topic of current, I would say the creepiest thing that's ever happened to me just happened like literally like 2 months ago, I think it was. In the last podcast, I know Mom was talking about how a lot of people think that you have to wait till night to do like ghost hunting or anything, and that is not true. Because I used to think that the most active was around 2-3 o'clock in the morning. Not always. So I was sitting in my apartment and I was watching Moana, you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't even anything substantial was even happening, but I was just watching TV, watching Moana. And
great movie, by the way.
Yeah, but the way that my apartment is laid out is the laundry room is compartmentalized within the kitchen. And so I was watching TV and I look to my right and I see very long fingers wrapped around the corner of a wall. And then I see a head peek out.
No.
It was so scary. And so have you heard of shadow people? That's literally what it was. So this person was like 7 feet tall. It was so dark, and I've never seen like a full figure before. Like, it's actually giving me goosebumps right now. It was so tall, and he was grabbing the wall and he peeked his head around the corner, and I just, oh my God, what is that? And so Peter, my husband, like sat straight up and he was like we didn't know how to respond. And so I just said, get out. Like, that was just an instinct to just say get out because it was so scary. And so the figure walked forward. I literally saw them pivot on their back foot and walk straight through the wall.
Oh, wow.
It was so scary.
It was
very, very scary. So after I saw that person go through the wall for the second time, I gathered my senses, obviously, and then I messaged Bev, who is a family friend of ours. She's a local psychic medium here in central Kentucky. And so I reached out to her and I was like, who was just in my apartment? Because I'm so scared right now. And so she said, oh, yeah, that was very frightening. You kind of scared him a little bit too. And I was like, oh, well, sorry about that, I guess. And she said that he lives in the building. She said his name is Ulysses. And she said he's a little odd, but he's not dangerous or anything, but just whenever I see him to just remind him to leave. So he does. I mean, I will feel a presence at night sometimes. The family that lived behind our apartment just moved out, and I've definitely noticed more movement in that laundry room area. And so I make sure to shut that door and to just say before I go to bed, hey, I'm going to sleep, don't come back.
Sounds like maybe he hung out with that other family a lot, and now that they're gone, he's wandering, trying to find new people to check out.
Yeah, he definitely likes to peep.
My name is Leanne, and I am daughter to Beth, an investigator as well, and I am cousin to Amy, an investigator, and her lovely wife, Heather. Also very good friends with Bethany, Kim, and Noelle. So I've been a part of the group since 2012 when we moved to Kentucky. I was originally born and raised in Florida. And I'm the skeptic of the group. I don't really have too many paranormal experiences. When I was a little girl in Florida, my mom worked at a dry cleaner. She worked there for 13 years. And every day after middle school, me and my sister would walk, I think it was like a block and a half, not even that, from the middle school, which was around the corner from the dry cleaners. And we would stay with my mom there until my dad picked us up when he got done with work, and then we'd head home. So we were there constantly, all the time. And it was like a home away from home, so my mom had a whole setup. But we were talking about something, don't really remember, and me being the skeptic, she was talking about the ghosts that lived in the dry cleaners with her, and that they were her friends, and they were friendly and nice, and all that. And they took care of her. I said something along the lines like, I don't believe in that, and was being rude, basically, to them and not respecting their space or anything like that. And they slammed the door, and my mom told me, to apologize and be more respectful, and I did not mess with them no more. So that was when I was a little girl. I was in junior high. I don't even remember what grade it was. And then I had another experience when I was a little bit older. At the time, we had went away for my mom's 40th birthday. And nobody knew at the time, but I was pregnant with my daughter. And me and my mom were staying at an inn with everybody else from the investigation team. And something had touched my foot when we were sleeping. Now, I don't know if somebody actually touched my foot or if it was my mother messing with me in her sleep, because she kept hitting me with her arms and legs all night. But something had touched my foot, and I did not enjoy that either. So one of my favorite things that happened on an investigation, we were setting up our cameras and everything like that, and we were looking on the TV monitor screen to make sure that everything was okay. And I had pulled Bethany aside, and I said, we have a little visitor. And she's like, what? And I was like, there's a mouse on the screen. No, it's not paranormal, but it was my favorite thing. It was funny. And he stayed there all night.
And I'm pretty sure we sent Kim upstairs to get the cameras that night and never did tell her about the mouse until later. She was not happy about it.
My name is Beth. I joined the team in 2012. Half of my family and friends are in the group, so it's nice on many reasons. I got interested in the paranormal when I was a kid. My mom would work at night and I would stay with my grandma. And grandma would always say, turn off that TV and let's listen to Haints. So that's what we did. Of course, we heard everything, and by the time Mama got home at 11:30 at night, me and Grandma both scared to death. That was probably it. I really noticed that maybe there was something out there other than what we see.
And for those, we're going to reference back to Beth's story about mentioning the haint. A haint is an unsettled or angry spirit. used mostly in the South and Appalachia. It can also just be a derivative of haunt that has evolved through time. Also, later on in a podcast, we are going to be having a discussion about Appalachian folklore and hauntings specific to this region, because with it being a large settlement of Scots-Irish people, there is a rich history of that.
What about your first paranormal experience?
Probably my first paranormal experience was when, I guess maybe I was 13 years old. And it was wintertime in eastern Kentucky, so it was cold and dark, even though it was probably 5:30 in the evening. My mom had been out in our shed and said that she had found an old Ouija board out there. One of my cousins was staying the night, and she said, "Come on, let's go down and get us." I ain't going down there. So my cousin went with her, and they brought back this thing. Of course I'd seen them on movies and things, but I had never played with one. So that evening we played with it, but the reason why we were doing all that is because the electric had went off and there was nothing to do. We were sitting there in the dark by candlelight playing this, and I think my mom and stepdad were probably playing cards or something at the table. We're laughing and giggling. You know, I didn't really put much thought into it. Kind of got boring after a bit, and we put it up. Electric's still off, so we went to bed earlier. We were sleeping on the couch. I had company. She was on one couch, I was on the other. The couch I was on, and the way I was laying, looked straight at a wall clock, a battery wall clock. Sound asleep, nothing, and the thing that happened on that Ouija, we had asked that Ouija board earlier, what time will the electric come back on? And I'm not sure the exact time, but it was something like 11:32. It was a very precise time that it told us, so didn't think much, went to sleep. I woke up to all the lights on all of a sudden and looked up at the clock, and it was exactly what time the Ouija board said that it would come back on. It went back off, and so that was my first experience with one and my last. I never touched one since, so I can't say that I had a bad experience, but I did have an experience. And I've had several more since then. I've actually seen a full-bodied person walk through my dining room. That was cool. I mean, he did it often. He didn't bother anybody. He didn't even act like he knew we were there. And come to find out, that same man had passed away on our property. An engine had fell on him. And that was about it.
Thanks, Beth. Next up, we have Heather and a special guest.
Hello, my name is Heather Murphy, a founding member of the Marley Knockers, and wife to Amy, fellow founding member. Also, I'm the only true Lexingtonian in the group. To continue on our individual origin stories, unlike many of our other members, I've never had a moment of, oh my goodness, I'm having a paranormal experience, or a moment of, I don't know what's happening. I don't consider myself a skeptic. I can 100% guarantee what evidence we have gathered, whether it be photographs, EVPs, is real, so I know this exists. But for some reason, the spirits do not want to reveal themselves to me. However, as a young child, I did produce a poltergeist. To elaborate on that, when I was a kid, heading into my preteens, my sister Jennifer and father was able to see all kinds of what I now know was residual spirits. You can see them, but you can't interact with them. They would see people partying and walking around the house. They said they were in multiple period time clothing. Music would be playing, and I never heard or saw anything. Both would complain the next morning on how they couldn't sleep because of it. Now, as far as the poltergeist is concerned, I was a very high-strung child, and I believe because of that high anxiety, high-strung personality, made it so I couldn't see the spirits my family could see, but that same personality created the poltergeist. I would cause pictures to fall off the wall. I would cause furniture to move, toys to move. One day when my father came home from work and asked my mom, "So how was it today?" And she told Dad, "Look in the dining room." and there was one of those cheap Kmart kickballs rolling in and out of the chairs and table legs. And she said it's been doing that for hours. I wasn't aware I was doing it. It wasn't until I was an adult that they tell me about it. Now, my favorite investigation was when we were at the Fall Estate, and me and Bethany, we were walking with PK, and she is a person who lived near the property, and she was telling us a story about an old lady who had turned into a fireball and burst through her front window and just flew into the sky. And then she just ends the story and walks away from us. And me and Bethany are standing there taking in this wild tale, and all of a sudden we could hear footsteps, because where we're at is very rural, right next to the Palisades. And the footsteps were getting closer and getting faster towards us. And we're like, do you hear that? And they just kept getting faster and faster. And I had a flashlight, I was shining it into the woods. I couldn't see anything, no eyes glowing back. And me and her hightailed it down that path and got back to the front of the house because we had no idea what was coming after us.
I wish we could share a sound clip of that running sound because it was legitimately one of the most terrifying things I've ever heard. And Heather, would you like to introduce our guest for today's episode?
I'd like to introduce my sister today in this podcast, Jennifer Murphy.
Hello.
She is a wonderful librarian here in Lexington at the East Side Branch.
Thank you. Yes, I'm excited. Thank you for inviting me to talk on your show today. I listened to your first episode. It made me think about when I first started. And I first started noticing things when we lived actually on the Army base. And I noticed like shadows that were always on the stairwell that led from upstairs that would go down. And that's like my first thought of that. I really thought there was something else. I mean, I was little. I didn't know how to articulate it, but to me it was scary. And it was obvious that there were people there and that I had trouble wanting to walk down the steps. And I told Mom that, and Mom's like, well, like she didn't remember, like she couldn't remember.
Well, yeah, I mean,
it was 100 years. But when we moved into the house is when it really exploded, where I was hearing things all the time. I was seeing things all the time. One night I had night terror to the point where I was literally crawling on the floor. I was afraid to be up tall, and I crawled to Mom and Dad's room because I thought that was the only way I was going to be able to get there. This is before you were born. And my Mom and Dad were just like, and I'm like, I was legit knew that there were people in the house. I took them as being bad, and they were going to get me. Now, looking back on that, every other thing that have ever happened in the house has never felt threatening to me at all. So I don't know what that was. I don't know if that was just some extreme anxiety on my part, or I don't know. I've never felt threatened. I've never felt like the ghost was going to get me, or I felt like someone was trying to hurt me. Although, one of the last experiences I ever had was and I'm not kidding you, it was really strange. And Mom saw it happen. Coming out of the kitchen, you know how we have that cabinet there with the glass that Mom has her Irish stuff? So I'm coming from the kitchen, and I went to walk around where the linoleum is to walk into the dining room to put something on the table. And somebody went just like this to me, pushing my head back. Just like that. And I felt it go all of my head, like jerked back. And Mom goes, "What's wrong with you?" And I was like, "Someone just pushed my head back." And it was weird.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was very powerful. And then I felt, like like, you know, like I felt like like Medusa. Like I felt like my hair was like electric. And I was like,
That's aggressive.
that was, and you know, and it happened twice. But that was the last physical things that ever happened. But the noises and stuff in the house are a constant. Like I constantly hear music, and I'll think, oh, it's opera night, or it's 70s or something, or I can't figure out what it is.
Yeah, I said it would be multiple time periods. It wasn't just when people say they're in period clothes. Well, there's a lot of periods in time. So I was like, it would be multiple. It just wasn't one time period. It was of different generations, not just one.
Yeah.
Right. And I think we touched on that on the first episode. Like, not all the ghosts are from 1700. You know, they're from old times.
Right.
No, exactly.
Since time memorial, after the first person died, then there you go.
Yep.
Yeah. I will tell one more story because I really like this story, and I think your listeners might like it, which is that many years ago I went to meet a friend of mine at the Loudon House, which is where they have the gallery, and he had a studio there, and his studio was actually in the tower, and I could see him. He was waving at me from the tower, and he told me to wait because he was going to have to let me in because most of the people were already gone. And so I was sitting on that fountain, just kind of hanging out, waiting for him to come down to get me. And I looked and I saw a cat. And I was like, oh, come here, kitty, come here. And it went right through my leg. It was a ghost kitty.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
And when it went through my leg, you know, I felt cold. And it kind of hung around me. And I'm wanting Patrick's attention. I'm like looking, and he's going his back is turning now. I can see him. And I'm like, I wanted him to look out the window. Like, you gotta see this. So he comes down, and I'm like telling him, he goes, oh yeah, oh wow. He goes, I never see that. I never see the cat. There's like two other people that always talk about the cat. And it turned out there is a cat that sometimes, you know, people see in the building and outside the building.
Wow.
So yeah,
That's pretty awesome.
That is awesome.
so that was one of my favorite things that's ever happened to me is the ghost kitty. But recently the big thing, it's kind of funny because the other night I was laying in bed, and for the longest time I kept trying to figure out if I thought hot water heaters make a lot of noise, and I thought, is this music that I'm hearing all the time? Is it just me filtering, trying to make it music? Is it that, or is it the hot water heater just making all these different sounds and it's just normal sounds? When we replaced it, the hot water heater, I thought, it's gonna be gone. I'm not gonna hear any of that stuff anymore. And for 2 nights I didn't hear nothing. I was like, oh, I guess it was it. I guess maybe I really wasn't hearing opera music. Maybe, I was hearing something, I don't know. And then laying there one night, and then sure enough, just as loud as it could be, some really loud concerto or something that was happening. I thought, okay, it's not the hot water heater. So it wasn't that. I was still hearing.
Jen, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your story. We really appreciate getting the opportunity to talk to you. One of my favorite things about this podcast is our ability to talk to others and learn about what experiences they've had. And on that same note, we have talked to people who don't believe at all.
Having this discussion with people about ghosts or spirits, and some people have a religious block about this issue. They do not believe in it because I really don't know what in the Bible leads them to believe this is not possible. Because if you read Luke 24:39,
I'm reading a passage from Luke 24:39, and this is Jesus speaking here. Look at my hands and my feet. It is I myself. Touch me and see. A ghost does not have flesh and bones. As you see, I have. Now reading from the King James Version. Behold my hands and feet, that it is I myself. Handle me and see, for a spirit hath not flesh and bones, and ye see me have.
So that is, to me, a direct reference from Jesus describing a ghost or a spirit. That they do not have flesh and bone.
And why would Jesus reference something that does not exist? If he had the term, whether it was spirit or ghost, the term was there. He would never say or refer himself to something that wasn't true. And this was happening right after the resurrection.
So I don't understand the block from religious people about paranormal activity. And I don't understand the idea that everything would be demonic in nature or evil in nature that you're encountering. That is not and cannot be true.
Right, and I think part of it, you have some current shows that kind of sensationalize the everything is demonic, moniker, or however you want to say it. They think everything is demonic or evil when it's just not.
Correct.
Some is just, your neighbor Joe is just coming by to visit.
And maybe Joe wasn't a nice guy. Maybe Joe was a jerk, and he's still a jerk. That's my understanding is that just like we are as humans, we can be in the afterlife. And we also have the same ability to grow and change and evolve and move on after our deaths. I just know that this is not all there is.
I agree. That is going to wrap up today's episode. Thanks for joining us as we introduce the rest of our team. On our next couple podcasts, we will probably be talking about different locations visited in Kentucky, kind of give you some history and background on those. We also have a new phone number if you would like to either call and suggest an investigation spot, or you can also call and leave a message about your ghost story if you would like it featured on our podcast. That telephone number is 859-242-5008. The voicemails on there are limited to 3 minutes, so if you want to tell a story and you think you may be a little more long-winded than that, just send us an email at marleyknockers@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.